Okay, everybody, welcome to Beyond Barley, a podcast from the Idaho Barley Commission, where we go deeper into the industry members, programs, and partnerships shaping the Idaho barley industry. In honor of World Trade Month, today's episode is focused on a topic that impacts Idaho barley growers every single day. So, even if it can sometimes feel far removed from the farm, we are going to be talking about international trade. So, today I'm joined by Ellen Zimmerman, Director of Industry Relations with the U.S. Grains and BioProducts Council. The council's work focuses on building relationships and developing markets around the world for U.S. grains and bioproducts, which include barley. So today we're diving deep into Trade 101 and discussing why trade matters to Idaho barley growers, how export markets help support demand for U.S. agriculture, and the role partnerships play in connecting Idaho barley to potential customers all around the world. So whether you're deeply involved in export markets or just curious about how global trade connects back to agriculture here at home, this conversation is designed to make trade approachable, practical, and relevant to the barley industry. So thank you, Ellen, so much for joining us today. This is such an exciting time during World Trade Month, so I'm really looking forward to the content that we'll be able to show our listeners to help them better understand the role that trade plays in agriculture and specifically in the barley industry.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and talk a little bit about trade and, of course, our partnership with Idaho Barley, too.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, let's get started. So just to start, Ellen, can you introduce yourself and share your role with the U.S. Grains and Bioproducts Council?
Sure. Nice to meet all of you. I'm Ellen Zimmerman, Director of Industry Relations for U.S. Grains and Bioproducts Council. I'm located in our headquarters in Washington, D.C., calling in today from the home office, though, located in D.C., just not in our physical office downtown. The role that I have, I am not shy to say, is the best job, definitely at the council, maybe the whole wide world. I really love what I do and am really honored to get to work on behalf of U.S. farmers, which of course includes our Idaho barley farmers. So my job is really about taking the interest of our members to our international staff and programs, and then taking back progress, discoveries, information, key points, highlights, that sort of thing from our international teams back to our members. So I kind of sit in between all of the action, which is what makes it so fun, and getting to interact with the farmers and also our international staff and international customers is just a really, really neat opportunity for me. I grew up on a small farm in Ohio, so you said like it seems far away, and that's certainly something I thought growing up in Ohio, and now I get to be connected to that international portion and still be rooted in U.S. agriculture, which is really neat for me.
Well, that's really exciting for you to be here. And what a background. I mean, coming from a small farm in Ohio. I'm sure there wasn't any barley grown on that farm, but that's okay.
Nope, no barley, no barley.
Yeah, had to give it a shot. All right. So, for the listeners that may not be familiar with the organization, can you give us a quick overview of what the U.S. Grains and Bioproducts Council does?
Absolutely. So, the U.S. Grains and Bioproducts Council is both an association and a USDA cooperator. So, that association piece is where we get great members like Idaho Barley. And we also represent sorghum growers and corn growers. So, all of the checkoffs that represent those three core commodities is part of our membership. We also like to say we represent the entire export value chain. So that includes our exporters, our merchandisers, our seed companies, our equipment manufacturers. Ethanol is one of the products we represent as well. So ethanol plants is a part of our membership. Really anything that touches the export value chain from the seed to the time it hits the water or the train, or the any way that mode of transportation that it is taking out of the country is part of our membership as well. So that's the association piece. And then the cooperator piece is a partnership we have with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. We receive funds through the Farm Bill and other programs they have available that allows us to set up operations around the world. So we have a full-time presence in 30 countries and programs in more than 70. And what those folks are doing is really being boots on the ground representation for our members here in the US, but also a partner to the Foreign Ag Service and partnership with the administration that's in office to promote exports, US exports specifically. So it's a very, very high level snapshot of what we do and where we do it.
Well, you guys do a lot of really important work. So thank you for giving, even though it was a high level, small snapshot of what you guys do. I mean, you guys do so much for the barley industry. So thank you for all you do, first of all. So how did you get involved in agriculture trade and export market development?
Yeah, great question. So, like I mentioned, I grew up in on a small farm in Ohio. My degree is in agricultural communications, and I thought I was going to be an on-air farm broadcaster. And after a really neat experience with RFD TV, I discovered that there is certainly a place in the world for on-air farm broadcasters, but it was not going to be me. I did not enjoy the on-air portion of it. But that gave me exposure to a lot of really cool things and getting to work with programmers that are on RFD TV, which to me was like my first look at member services. And then I had an opportunity to actually work for Ohio corn and wheat farmers, which was my first introduction to kind of right next to the farmer working with them and the checkoff system. I absolutely loved it. And that's where I got exposure to then the U.S. Grains Council. And I really enjoyed working with the council. I thought the work that they did was really cool. And they had an elite staff working around the world on behalf of growers. So this job opportunity came open and I took the leap of faith and applied. And now I still can't believe 6 years later, I'm a part of that really cool staff getting to do really cool work on behalf of farmers.
Well, I've had the opportunity to meet a lot of your staff members within U.S. Grains and BioProducts Council, and I can't say enough great things about everybody that I've come across. And the individuals that are involved in this organization are just substantially just exceptional, and I've met individuals from Southeast Asia, Sierra down to Panama, and just every single one of them are really focused on the mission that it is for growers. So I really, really appreciate that. So
yeah, absolutely. And thank you.
Yeah, of course. So what does industry relations and market development actually look like in your day-to-day work?
Yeah, so like I said, I kind of sit in between the domestic membership side and the international program side. So for me, industry relations, today I'm having several phone calls with members, this podcast interview, of course. I do a lot of work with our board of directors, leadership development, that sort of thing with the growers. And then also doing a lot of what I call matchmaking of, okay, this state is really interested in this market. How can I get them more plugged into programs, or how can I get them more market information that our staff is already doing and working in that particular market? Again, because it's the membership piece, I do a lot of member service type work. So the meetings and conferences run out of the industry relations department. So some days that looks like counting banquet chairs in a hotel room to make sure we're properly prepped for our members and growers to come into that space. Sometimes it's writing funding proposals, PowerPoint, could really be anything. But I think the wide mix of things, from podcast interviews to traveling internationally to county banquet chairs to sitting in my home office working on Excels. It keeps me on my toes and interested in all of it.
Well, you sound like a jack of all trades within the trade world. Haha. Okay. So, since this episode is centered around World Trade Month, let's start with the basics. So, why is trade so important to U.S. agriculture?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one of the things I did not include in what my day-to-day work looks like is I do a lot of trade education for our members and producers. So getting to talk kind of the basics and why is it important and why should farmers care about trade is certainly within my wheelhouse and something I get really excited about. So I think the reason trade is so important to U.S. agriculture can be summed up with one statistic. 95% of the world's population lives outside of the United States. And if to connect the dots even further, that means 95% of our customers live outside of the United States, which means any chance of further profitability and kind of maximizing that bottom line for farmers, it has to happen outside of the US because that's where the numbers are, that's where the mouths are to feed, the vehicles are to fuel, the mulching houses are to give quality barley. You know, the majority of that is happening outside of the US, and that's why agriculture needs to stay front and center focused on trade.
Yeah, it's really incredible when you think about the population density, because we can get so focused on what's happening in the United States. And I mean, the population that's outside of the US is just incredible. And we have a huge responsibility for supplying for that demand outside of.
Mhm.
So it's a really, I don't know, it really changes your perspective when you look at those numbers. So I'm glad you shared those with us.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So when people hear the word trade, they often think about politics or tariffs. At the grower level, what does trade actually mean for a barley grower here in Idaho?
Yeah, so I would say the short answer to that is that means market access, that means market choices, and that means demand, right? So if we have more countries that we have access to trade with, that is greater demand, a larger piece of that 95% pie that we can get access to compete in this international global economy that agriculture is. The other thing I would say for Idaho barley is there is quite a bit of value in grain and grain trade being brought to the state. So we do the value of trade study every year, which is talking about the narrowing it down to your economy of what is the value of grain trade. So we just came out with the latest study, and grain products added $270 million in value to the Idaho economy. That's 92 million in gross state product and 974 jobs to the state of Idaho. So again, if it's not enough for you to think about the potential for customers, thinking about the impact to your state's economy because of specifically grain and grain products being traded and exported, hopefully that gets you excited about trade. And again, I want to emphasize grain and grain products because I know in Idaho, you all grow way more than barley, right? There's a lot more to offer in your state. And so these numbers just multiply when you look at adding in other commodities. The value added products, livestock, I would say malt is an added value product, right? That is more valuable than just commodity barley. And so those numbers get really big as far as the impact to Idaho's economy when you consider all of those pieces that are being exported from the state.
Yeah, it really is a huge return on investment, I think. And sometimes we don't think about those numbers coming back to us, especially within the state of Idaho. But it's great to hear those numbers. So thank you for sharing those.
Yeah, of
So
course.
build on that. What are some common misconceptions people have about agriculture trade?
Oh, I think the biggest one and most obvious one to me is how complicated international trade can be. The idea is quite simple, right? But it is truly a complex world when we look at supply chains, how grain moves. You brought up policies, our trade agreements versus those countries we maybe don't have trade agreements with. What does getting access to those look like? When we talk about tariffs or even non-tariff barriers are just as much of a headache and sometimes even harder to work with because they're outside of a framework that we're familiar with. The number of people or equipment that touch the commodity by the time it leaves the field in Idaho to the time it is with a customer, how many times is that handled by how many machines and modes of transportation, right? There's a lot of hands touching it, both physically and also, I would say, like theoretically, when we look at the trade landscape when it comes into access. So, trade is complicated. It's important, it's valuable, but it is complicated too.
Well, thank goodness that we have organizations like the council that helps us translate all the complications because trade is a whole other world of its own. And I feel like it's almost another language of its own because there's so many different caveats. So we appreciate the work that you do to help us better understand. So can you give us a snapshot of where U.S. barley and barley products are exported around the world?
Yes, absolutely. So, we come out each year with our top markets for each of our commodities. So looking at the last marketing year, 24-25 marketing year, Mexico was our number one customer. Canada was number two, South Korea number three, Japan number four, and Taiwan was rounding out our top five. And then some other top markets, Ecuador, UK, Colombia, UAE, and Trinidad are some of those other top markets for US barley.
Very nice. So, what makes US barley and specifically Idaho barley? I have to embellish on Idaho barley.
Of
Um,
course.
what makes that barley valuable in the international markets?
Yeah, so I would say the thing that sets US barley, Idaho barley apart from the rest is, of course, the quality. We have extremely high quality products, and you all make my job super easy because I can say that about corn, sorghum, barley, ethanol, DDGs, all of the products that the council represents. We come out on top time and time again on quality, which is something our customers, of course, really value and want.
Very nice. So, what role does market development play compared to simply selling grain internationally, if you will?
Yeah, market development is a long-term play, right? Selling barley is a single interaction. Hopefully, you're building a relationship between the buyer and seller and maybe a recurring transaction. But in reality, that sale is like a one-time situation, short term. Market development is talking more about that access. How can we set it up so that person that you had that one-time sale with has access and ability to trade with you again moving forward? And so, like I mentioned, the council has boots on the ground all over the place working on behalf of Idaho barley growers. We're in programs in more than 70 countries. A lot of them are focused on that access and demand building. So they know US barley is high quality. They know how to interact with that very complex pricing structure, very complex supply chains, right? So that's all part of the access piece that we work on. And so to give you an idea of like when I say long term, what does that mean? As we have set up full-time presence and offices around the world, it takes about 15 to 20 years from the time we start working in a market to the time where we see regular interactions and regular sales happening. Obviously, the world changes a lot in 15 to 20 years. Those examples are we're just now seeing things coming to fruition from 20 years ago. And now we have, email, the internet, things are able to move a little bit faster in the world. And so hopefully, when I say long term, in 10 years, I'll be able to say it's 10 to 15 years, and things will again kind of speed up and keep pace. But it's a long-term play. It's a long-term play for us to do market access and market development as opposed to just sales.
Absolutely. I would agree with you on that, of course, because I think so many people get focused on short-term benefits and short-term outcomes where with trade, it's such a long game. And it takes a long time to build those relationships, maintain those relationships. And I mean, have the council providing those kinds of resources to be able to maintain those relationships and that market development is really important because, like you said, it's 10 to 15 years, but hopefully it'll get more and more streamlined, but it's always going to be a long game at the end of the day. So,
Yeah, and I love what you said. I always say our currency at the council is
um,
information and relationships, right? We are not transacting any sales. We are not the ones actually giving money for a product or a product for money, vice versa, whatever that may be. Our currency is how can we put buyers and sellers in a room, right? That's the relationship piece. And then how do we give them the tools to be confident with making those sales and even like coming to the space to be willing to make those sales. And that's the information piece. So exactly what you said. We work off information and relationships.
well, you guys are the perfect liaisons. I mean, with resources all over the world, you can't get much better than that. So, the Idaho Barley Commission works with the council on market development efforts. So, why is that collaboration between these two entities important?
Yeah, we could not do what we do without our state partners, Idaho Barley being, of course, a really key one for our barley commodity. And I think the reason that that's important is, again, looking at that big number of 95% of the world's population is outside of the US. It is really important that we're able to showcase the entire export value chain when we go into programs. Having barley growers be a part of those programs and missions where it makes sense. The farmer voice is still the most trusted in the world, and that is the truth, no matter what language we're translating into. And so, again, having that grower piece is really, really important. The other thing I would say is seeing is believing. We say that all the time. And so when we have trade missions, being able to partner with Idaho Barley and our other barley states to bring a potential buyer, to bring a nutrition team, a brewing team, an import team of any kind to the state to see, like, look at the quality, meet the farmers, understand how the product moves from this farm you're looking at right now to whatever destination we may be working with. That adds so much value and so much trust into the process. And again, we can't do those types of programs if we don't have the partnerships in our states.
I really like what you said about seeing is believing because, I mean, taking it into the perspective of an average everyday person, I mean, at least for me, I hate online shopping, but I rather shop in the store so that I can see it. And I think that's what these relationships really thrive on is be like you said, seeing is believing, getting to interact with the grower itself, and that just builds a lasting relationship and a lasting impact, I feel like, at the end of the day. So I've been able to witness some of these trade missions, and I've seen a lot of positive impact come from those. So how do grower checkoff dollars help support trade relationships and export opportunities?
Yeah, great question. So we can look at this lots of different ways. We call member dollars or checkoff dollars our first dollars. And so once the council receives those, we're able to use those to do the work we do in the US. And more importantly, we're able to access those federal dollars. So I mentioned we're a cooperator with USDA. we're
Mhm.
not eligible for those programs unless we have member and industry support. So you could say, those numbers I shared earlier is certainly a way to look at return on investment of Idaho barley dollar checkoff dollars towards trade back to your economy. The other great thing is because we use them as member dollars, we have a pretty good match. For every Idaho barley dollar that gets put in, we get about $1.50 to $2 of federal dollars that allows us to operate around the world. So, that's a pretty good match for additional dollars and really increases the way your dollars are leveraged around the world. Those programs at USDA typically have an ROI of 24 to 1. So Idaho Barley is giving $1. We're getting, let's say, easy math, $2 more from the federal government, and those dollars are getting a 24 to 1 return on investment based on the sales and the impact we're able to track around the world. So that is just a couple of ways that Idaho Barley dollars are making magic happen around the world for trade. And again, every dollar is really being boosted by that match and the impact around the world too.
Well, like I said before, a great return on investment for our growers, I think. So, looking ahead, where do you see the biggest opportunities for continued growth in barley demand?
Yeah, so of course, our number one market, Mexico, is an area we're looking to continue to develop. Canada is another great one just because of the logistic ease of trading with Mexico and Canada being our partners here in North America. Pretty easy, the easiest logistics, anyways, we're going to find to get those into those other countries. The other area I would say I'm pretty excited about is Southeast Asia. We've seen more interest in those markets in barley and the programs that we're doing there are really having an impact. So I would say Mexico, Canada, Southeast Asia are my top markets I'm watching for barley right now.
Well, thank you for watching out for us. Uh, what can growers do to stay informed and engaged when it comes to trade and export markets?
Yeah, because it's so complicated, tracking and following it can also be quite complicated. The things I would say that would help growers understand the impact and kind of current dynamics, we would love to see them get involved with the council. We have several A teams, a trade policy A team specifically if you get excited about the policy front of trade. The other thing I would say is follow along on our socials and our website. We are constantly posting, news developments, stories about those trade missions, about those programs that are directly impacting Idaho barley. And then that also will give you a chance. We keep up to date with agreements signed, tariffs being put on, reduced, taken off, non-tariff barriers we're tracking, all of those good things we post to our website and socials. And that's a pretty easy way to stay engaged and on track. If you want to go a little bit deeper, we have a trade education page on our website that you can dig into kind of the trade essentials. And then if you're feeling really ambitious, I would say reach out to me. I would love to share some other specific grower trade education efforts we have and get you plugged into some of that work too.
That's awesome. Yeah, your guys' website, I mean, it's always constantly being updated and it's a really great resource. So, if there's one message that you hope Idaho barley growers take away during World Trade Month, what would it be?
Ooh, amazing question. I would say one thing I hope a farmer who would take away is that most of our commodities in the US are fungible commodities. So even if you are taking your barley to a malt house that is close, or that feels like a closed loop system to you, or if it's a feed grade barley and you're taking it to a cattle feeder down the road, I would say that is not where the barley story ends. And everyone should care about trade. And as I like to say, we want to move that grain, whether that is barley being exported as a commodity. We're exporting the beer that your barley it has made. We're exporting that cattle, beef products that your barley helped make. And that's not where the barley story ends. There's a lot more in ways that trade is impacting your operations than you may realize.
Okay, so Ellen, one final question, and then
Okay.
we'll let you go. When you think about the future of Idaho and U.S. barley in the global marketplace, what does continued success look like to you?
Yeah. I think continued success is continuing to have conversations around the quality that Idaho barley brings to the marketplace, talking about those different ways that malt barley can be exported and where the potential success for that is. And then I also think just having more people have exposure to Idaho barley and the work that they do at the state level, the growers that you all have, is a huge success for us too. Again, it's our greatest honor to work on behalf of the U.S. farmer, and that is certainly the case for Idaho barley farmers too.
Well, Ellen, thank you so much for working on behalf of the growers here in Idaho and growers all around the world. And just thank you so much for joining me today and helping break down the importance of trade and export market development in a way that connects directly back to Idaho barley growers. So thank you to our listeners for joining us on Beyond Barley. We hope today's conversation made agriculture trade feel a little bit more approachable and highlighted just how connected Idaho barley is to markets all around the world. So if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow along for more conversations connecting growers, industry partners, and all the people helping shape the future of barley. And remember, when trade works, the world wins. So thank you again for listening, and we'll see you next time on Beyond Barley.